Hello and welcome back to East Coast Amusements. In this mini-series, I'm covering all of the parks that I visited during my East Coast coaster road trip and my experiences at each one. In the last episode, we covered my time at Busch Gardens Williamsburg, which turned out to be my favorite day of the trip. In this episode, we'll be talking about another elite park that I visited for the second time this year, Carowinds. So let's get right into it. Given that we stayed in Williamsburg the night before, we had quite the drive ahead of us the next morning. We left the hotel pretty early in the morning as it was about a 5-hour drive to the park, and we ended up getting to the park around 1 or 2 in the afternoon. As I had previously visited the park back in April, I was excited to get back on Fury 325 and Copperhead Strike. But on the previous visit to the park, we only really made a pit stop to get a ride on Fury, Copperhead, and Afterburn before heading out. This time around, I actually had time to take in the park and enjoy my visit rather than feeling rushed. When we pulled into the park, it was a no-brainer that we started with Fury. I missed the coaster so much that I was basically having dreams about riding it, so it was oddly therapeutic getting right back on. During this day at Carowinds, there was one big advantage and one big disadvantage that really stood out to me at the park. The advantage was that Carowinds was a wasteland. The park felt completely empty and there wasn't a single ride that was more than a station wait. It was heavenly, but only for maybe about an hour. This is when the downside started hitting really hard and we realized why there was nobody at the park this day. The heat was absolutely unbearable. We were visiting the park when a heat wave was coming right through Charlotte and the high for the day was 100 degrees. We were practically melting and we just couldn't seem to find any decent AC, making the day absolutely brutal. We were taking pretty frequent breaks, but even then, it was tough making it through the day. Anyway, to get back to the coasters, we headed to Fury first thing and obviously it was running insane. With it being mid-afternoon, the ride had plenty of time to warm up from the morning and I'm sure the heat helped. Fury was hauling. Every moment of airtime that I experienced back in spring felt stronger than before and I just felt like the ride was way more out of control. We got 5 walk-on rides on Fury before we started branching out to other parts of the park and starting to get the credits. In this time, we got rides on Carolina Cyclone, Hurler, Flying Cobras, Carolina Gold Rusher, Ricochet, Kitty Hawk, Vortex, and even Woodstock Express. We saved the big hitters for last as we knew they'd be a walk-on and we wanted to marathon each one individually before moving on to the next one. After getting most of the credits, we started our mini marathons, with the first coming to Intimidator. Now, I had not ridden Intimidator prior to this visit, so I was excited to finally get on another B&M Hyper that had the tiered seating like Diamondback. I know people drag this coaster, calling it Intimidator, but I actually thought it was a solid hyper and an airtime machine. The ejector in the front row was a lot of fun, and the sustained floater in the back row was awesome. Not to mention, the crew at Intimidator was killing it this day. The station would be completely empty, and they were pumping out their 3 trains at breakneck speed. Honestly, all of the ops at the park were amazing, and I admire their ability to absolutely crush it on this day when the heat was so immense. We finished up at Intimidator and headed over to Afterburn, where I got 2 insane rides in the front and back row. The positives on this ride might be more intense than Montu's, and there are still some days when I think back to this and wonder if Afterburn is actually my number 1 invert. The Batwing is insane, and since there is no mid-course, you absolutely fly into the final corkscrew. I loved every second of Afterburn, and I wish I had gotten more rides on it, but I think if I had any more rides on that coaster, I would have blacked out. I was pretty dehydrated this day, and those positives are having me see gray for a lot of the ride. After getting plenty of footage of Afterburn, I decided to head back to Copperhead Strike. It was getting about sunset, which made my rides on Copperhead visually stunning. Once again, the ride was a walk-on, and I was lapping this thing. I must have gotten like 7 or 8 rides before I took a little break to get some footage. The crew over at Copperhead was killing it too. I swear they were trying to beat a dispatch record or something this day. The 2 ride ops on platform were quite literally running up and down checking restraints, with one having a mic and spilling to the 6 guests on the train about what was about to happen on the ride. You could hear the struggle in his voice, but you could clearly tell that these guys were enthusiasts, and they were taking great pride in their roles this day. If you guys are watching this, shout out to y'all, because it honestly kind of made my day. But anyway, the ride itself slapped. Mach hit it out of the park with this one. I love how it goes from long moments of hang time to quick snappy bits of ejector airtime, and then right back into the hang time. Yes, the launches are quite weak, but they weren't designed to be punchy. If they did, it would take away from the hang time, and I like that Copperhead Strike has it. After our marathon on Copperhead and getting plenty of footage, we took a little break before we finished out our evening on Fury 325. It was starting to cool down, so the park wasn't nearly as hot, which made the experience much more enjoyable. The night rides were slightly busier, as I'm sure everyone else had the same idea to head over to Fury, but we were still getting walk-on rides in the middle rows. We got several front row rides as well, which if you ask me, Fury is 100% a front row ride. The speed is nuts in the front row, and the ride just feels so out of control. Don't get me wrong, I do love the back row, but I just prefer this coaster up front. We stayed at Fury until park closed, and we must have gotten like 12 rides on it. Those Fury rides were elite, and for a while, they were what solidified Fury as my #1 coaster. Until just about a few weeks ago. What can I say, Iron Gwazi is just that good. We left the park and headed to the hotel for the night, and we told ourselves that we would get back to the park in the morning before hitting the road to get more rides on Fury, some merch, and some more footage. The next morning, we did 3 rides on Fury, got some pins and shirts, and some more footage of Fury and Afterburn before heading out for the day. As far as parks go, Carowinds was one of the best days of the trip. Yes, it was extremely hot, but the crowds were non-existent, which made for some excellent mini marathons and just a really chill day at the park. I will always look forward to getting back to this park, and I hope Cedar Fair keeps pouring money into it because it truly is elite. All they have to do now is either RMC Hurler or get a Raptor in my honest opinion, but that's a discussion for another time. For Carowinds, the ride counts are as follows: 20 on Fury, 10 on Copperhead Strike, 6 on Intimidator, 2 on Afterburn, 1 on Flying Cobras, 1 on Ricochet, 1 on Hurler, 1 on Vortex, 1 on Carolina Gold Rusher, 1 on Carolina Cyclone, 1 on Kitty Hawk, and 1 on Woodstock Express. Unfortunately, Nighthawk was down and I didn't really bother with getting the Wilderness Run credit, but maybe I'll snag them on my next visit. So what are your thoughts on Carowinds? Is Fury 325 the best B&M coaster out there? Is it the best coaster period? What do you guys think should come to this park in the future? Let me know down in the comments. The final park of the summer road trip is Six Flags Over Georgia, which we will be covering in the next video. I may have 2 bonus videos coming out covering 2 other parks that I visited this year, but they weren't part of the road trip, so we will see if they come out. With that, I'm Sean from East Coast Amusements, and I'll see you guys in the next one.